This is the Cycling Over 60 podcast, season 2, episode 47, As Fit as in My 30s. And I'm your host, Tom Butler. Thanks for joining me here on the podcast, where I interview people who I think have valuable information to share about how to get fit and stay fit later in life, and to talk a bunch about bicycling. First, here's a brief update on how my fitness journey is going. I just want to say again how much I enjoy hearing from people in the Cycling Over 60 Strava Club, and I particularly enjoy the pictures. I know I've said this before, but it really is true. This week, I enjoyed the sight and sound of a young osprey that Larry L. posted on Strava. And I certainly enjoyed the message that Erin Medina posted about her journey. It was spectacular. The whole post is great, and it starts out with her sharing that she started weight training at 61 years old. I would encourage everyone to go to the club posts and read her story. Thanks, Erin, for sharing. It was super motivating. As I mentioned last week, on Friday, I wrote a section of U.S. Bike Route 10 that I plan to use to ride across Washington in September. I started at New Halem and rode 25 miles to the East Creek Trailhead. I think that ride gave me a good idea what it would be like to ride over the passes. A big reason to scout the road was so that my wife Kelly could see what the conditions are like. She hasn't thought this challenge for season 2 was a good idea. I was hoping that by seeing the route, either I would determine it was too much of a challenge, or she would become more comfortable with it. She drove from Marble Mount, where we had stayed the night, to drop me off at New Halem. Then she picked me up at the East Creek Trailhead. After that, we drove to Washington Pass to check out the rest of the climb. And then I recorded her response to seeing the conditions. Here's what she had to say. You just got done driving State Route 20 from Marble Mount to Washington Pass. So what's your impression?
It's pretty.
Okay.
Lots of places to hike and lots of views to see, lots of waterfalls.
It'd be definitely a place that we would want to come do some camping, huh?
Yeah.
How about for someone riding a bicycle?
I don't know.
You have been not excited about me doing that ride.
Yeah.
What did today do? Did today confirm your nervousness, or did today alleviate your nervousness?
Today resigned me to it.
Resigned you to it?
Yeah.
Like, you're not happy about it, but you're kind of like, it's going to happen? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's going to happen, and I think it will be okay. I mean,
okay.
I can't say that I really think it's still a great idea, but I think it's going to happen, and it'll be probably okay.
Okay. Well, that's good news, because it could have been different. And, you know, there were some places that we were driving that the side of the road looked terrible.
Yeah, they were, and I wanted to ask you about those.
Before I talk about my thoughts on the route, let me ask, what did you think of her response? Not a lot of enthusiasm, I would say. I think it is hilarious that when I asked her what she thought, her first comment was about how beautiful it was. Like she was avoiding the thought of me riding that route. So I went with it and talked about camping, seeing if she would bring the conversations around to her thoughts on me riding State Route 20. But that didn't happen. And then when I asked her specifically about riding it, she said, how about for someone riding a bicycle?
I don't know.
Isn't that as lukewarm as you can get? And talking more about it didn't seem to help. You have been not excited about me doing that ride.
Yeah.
What did today do? Did today confirm your nervousness, or did today alleviate your nervousness?
Today resigned me to it.
Resigned you to it?
Yeah.
Like, you're not happy about it, but you're kind of like, it's going to happen? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's going to happen, and I think it will be okay. I mean,
okay.
I can't say that I really think it's still a great idea, but I think it's going to happen, and it'll be probably okay.
I guess I'm resigned to it, and I think it is going to be okay is the most I'm going to get at this point. Now, I'm going to be honest and say I wish Kelly was excited about it, but I do believe, as funny as it sounds, that her response there is better than what she's been thinking. And I think if she was really afraid of me riding the route, I think she would have said that. I do see that we are moving in the right direction here. After all, before we did this test ride, she was really against me doing it. I'm hoping that breaking down the route a little bit more, she'll warm up more and more to the idea of me doing this challenge. Here are my thoughts about the route. First, I never felt unsafe on the ride. There was one time when a large motorhome passed me and I felt the gush of wind from it. It was too close to me. I can be sure that I will get passed by several motorhomes on this trip, so I'm going to get a mirror on my bike before I do it. That way I can make sure that I can move over as far as possible when a big motorhome is coming. An important thing is I felt comfortable with the climbing. For the 25 miles, I climbed 3,081 feet. I wasn't sure what I would feel like after doing that climb, but I felt fine. Because of the downhill sections, I was able to average 9.4 miles per hour. I believe that is enough to get me over the passes and then down the other side to where I want to stay and do it in a reasonable amount of time. Again, on this test ride, I stopped after 25 miles, and I will have to do another 17.8 miles to make it over Washington Pass. That 17.8 miles includes about the same amount of climbing, so it's a little bit steeper, but I still think it's not going to be a big problem. And then from there is a 30-mile downhill to where I will stay in Winthrop. Now, based on this test ride, I think I am good for at least the first 2 days of the trip. But I still have challenging days beyond this, so I'm still not 100% confident I can do the whole ride. I do know one thing: I will need to figure out how to carry enough water if it is a hot day when I'm climbing up to Washington Pass. There aren't many places to stop for water in the park. Of course, Kelly is going to be around in the support vehicle, but there is no cell coverage in the park, so everything has to be coordinated in advance. I got interested in the writings of Phil Daoust, a joint deputy editor at The Guardian, in March. In The Guardian Online, he posted an article with this title: "Will years of drinking and inactivity be a problem?" Since March, Daoust has posted several articles about longevity. I thought a friend of mine, Dr. Erin Medina, would be a great person for me to discuss what Daoust was writing about. He has been focused on the link between lifestyle and longevity for his whole career. I'm so happy that Ernie joined me to answer some questions on the topic. Here's my chat with him. I am so pleased to welcome Dr. Erin Medina to the podcast this week. Dr. Medina, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Now, I have wanted to have you on since like the beginning of the podcast. We have known each other for a very long time, and I thought that your perspective would be really good. And a big reason for that is that I know that you've been focused on helping people stay healthy for a long time. Lifestyle medicine is a term that has been around a while, but when you started working in the field, it was really before that concept was really widely known, I believe.
Yeah.
So can you talk about what got you interested in the link between lifestyle and health?
Well, I grew up in a healthcare family, a medical family. I think you remember my parents from Michigan, our Michigan days. They were both physicians. So I was exposed to, healthcare stuff for a long time. But then it wasn't until a mutual friend, Dr. Wes Youngberg, who really got me thinking more about the wellness side of things. And that was my junior year in college, basically. That's sort of what steered me away from more sick care to health care and wellness care, if you will, and prevention. So that was sort of the start of it. I got back, I was serving a year in Japan and Singapore as a student missionary and teaching English. Came back, thought I was going to go the usual route, follow my friend's footsteps. But then when I talked to Wes, he was the one that really turned me on to lifestyle medicine. We didn't call it lifestyle medicine back then. It was just more about preventive medicine or prevention. And he was here at Loma Linda at the time. So he told me all about this. And hey, this is the field you'd really love to get to. It's all about exercise and nutrition and all that. And that really piqued my interest because I was really more interested in prevention versus just fixing sick people and treating them after the fact. So that's sort of where it all started.
And I'm guessing this is like 86, 87.
Yeah, I got back. I was gone 85, 86. I came back in 87, January of 87. So that's when changed my major. I was a med tech major, switched it to health science. Fortunately, the prerequisites for grad school were similar, so I didn't have to do a whole lot, but I did change my major and then finished in 89 and came out to Loma Linda University in 89. Then I've been out here ever since.
And teaching.
Yeah, well, when I graduated in 93 from with my master's in public health and health education and my doctorate in public health in preventive care. And so when I graduated in 93, I immediately my last place where I was doing my internship was at a place called Beaver Medical Group in Redlands, California. And so I did about 6 months there. My last 6 months of my graduate school program, I was working on my research, my dissertation at the same time. And then I was basically working full days working in health education there at the time as an intern, a student intern. And then when I was done in, end of May, 1st of June, they said, well, where are you going? Who's going to keep doing all this stuff that I started over those last 6 months? I started a stress management program. I revamped their quit smoking program. I was working in weight loss and all that. So I said, well, I'm looking for a job. And so we went right down to HR and she created my job on the spot. And I was like number three employee in the department at the time. We had a part-time dietitian, full-time secretary, and a director. So I was like the third person. And then I worked there for about 21 years. So it grew from a very small few clinics to a very large medical system. And so by the time Loma Linda brought me back, that was like 21 years later, we had grown into a huge facility, over 100 something physicians, and our department was big. And so, but I came back to Loma Linda because I figured, hey, I could help train the next generation of preventive care specialists and still do some of what I was doing there because that was one of my conditions for coming back. I said, hey, I don't want to leave the clinical setting. And they said, yeah, no, we don't want you to leave that. We want you to be sort of a bridge between academia and the clinical side because there was all these silos. And so because I was sort of a bridge. I was from the clinical side, but now as an academic side, I was sort of like that bridge. And then I've been here now 10 years. So it's been 10 years since I've been here. So I've been in wellness and lifestyle medicine, preventive care for a little over 30 years now.
One of the things that makes your perspective really valuable is the fact that you did have this real clinical application kind of
Mm.
early on, where there wasn't a lot of places around that took prevention that seriously as a member of the entire care team. Is that a fair statement to make?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, back then when I was first starting out, there was hardly anybody focusing in this area. I mean, I knew some of my mentors like Wes and others were the founders of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, for example, ACLM. Back then, we only had like a couple hundred members at the most. A lot of the members, the founding members were from Loma Linda because we were really the only ones at the time doing lifestyle medicine. And I was on the board of directors. I mean, because they probably needed, they're probably desperate for board members at the time. So I was really early on. I was in that. Now, when you look at ACLM, it's the leading lifestyle medicine association out there. It has I forgot how many members they have, but when we were having our annual meetings back then, we were lucky to get a couple hundred people. I mean, that was like, wow, we're doing really well. Now they get, over 4,000, 5,000. I mean, they get a lot. It's huge, and there's universities from all over the place, and a lot of people are involved in it. So yeah, it was not a known thing back then within the healthcare system. So we were really, Loma Linda was really on the cutting edge of lifestyle medicine, preventive care, that kind of thing.
And Loma Linda is known, we've talked about it a few times on the podcast, as a blue
Mm,
zone. And
yes,
so it is in the heart of some place that's been recognized as a community that embraces longevity. And
yes.
I think that also gives your perspective something unique because of being in the heart of that and the research that goes on there.
You're right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, it's sort of in our DNA. I mean, it's even from the spiritual side, Loma Linda is a Seventh-day Adventist church, and even our denomination is really rooted in health, and we're known for our healthful living and that kind of thing. So it's part of our makeup. not just academically, but also from a spiritual denominational standpoint.
Now, you have a relationship with cycling. Can you talk a bit about cycling in your life?
When you say cycling, probably we should clarify there's a lot of cycling, right? There's a lot of different types. So I am not a road cyclist. I'm more of a mountain biker. I like mountain biking. I was a mountain bike coach. So, which I didn't actually do a lot in my undergrad back in Michigan because there's no mountains there, right? It's flat. But when I came out to California, that's when I really got into it. And then, so my wife and I really early on, we were into mountain biking and would go up to the mountains every weekend and find a new trail, a new ride up there. And then when we had our daughter, she was, we were pulling her on the bike trailer and then the tag along bike. Then she had her own bike, and fast forward, she got onto the mountain bike team, and in her senior year, I was a mountain bike coach for the team, a parent coach, I should say. I wasn't the main coach. We had main coaches, but parent coach. And then her senior year of high school, they won the SoCal Division II mountain bike title for NICA, which is the National Intercollegiate Association. It's basically the organization for high school mountain biking in the US. So that was really exciting. And I still do mountain biking now. When we were homeschooling Summer, our daughter, I started a mountain bike club for the homeschoolers. Since I was one of the few dads that had a flexible schedule, being a teacher, I could, arrange my time. So I was the one that would lead out and help the kids, the homeschool kids, mountain biking here in our hills, right here in Loma Linda.
As I watch cycling,
Hmm.
cycling competitions, whether it's the Tour de France or
Right.
a smaller mountain bike competition like you would have been observing, as a parent, it seems like there's an element of crashing. That, I mean, was that ever like a consideration as a parent watching your daughter fly down some hills or whatever?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I remember when she first started on the team officially, she was on the swim team since she was 6. So she did swimming, and then she also did ballet and dance. So she was very cardiovascular. Her VO2 max was through the roof. I mean, she could swim for hours nonstop. She was a machine, and the butterfly was her signature stroke, which is one of the hardest strokes out there. And I think her ballet dancing helped with that because she was very flexible, through her whole body. So cardiovascularly, she was a machine, but going downhill, she was as scared about crashing as anybody else. I mean, she would go, so she would pass a lot of kids, with girls that she raced against on the uphills, but then on the downhills, they'd all pass her. So that second, between the first and second year that she was racing, her junior and senior year, she was JV on the first year, varsity on the second year. The coaches really had to work with her about increasing her speed on the downhill, her confidence. And really what it boils down to, it really boils down to technique. And they're not doing Red Bull. You've seen the Red Bull riders. I mean, they're not doing that. In fact, in NICA, your team will get penalized if you're caught, doing unnecessary jumping. I mean, they try to keep it really safe for the kids. So if you learn the technique, you can keep crashing to a minimum. And so she learned the technique. She did crash a little bit here and there, but nothing like crazy crashing. And yeah, she increased her speed quite a bit. She became a much better mountain biker than me. She could leave me behind in the dust on the uphill and the downhill. So I wasn't worried about her. I was worried more about when I bring the kids, homeschool kids, mountain biking, and parents will ride with us. I'm more afraid of the parents than I am of the kids because I say this in my 25 years of bringing now 3 generations of kids. The last group of kids, not the current ones, but the last group of kids that I was bringing out riding, they're all graduating college now. So, they came in waves. And all those years I've been doing that, I didn't lose a single kid to a serious injury. Yeah, knees scraped and all this, but never had a broken bone, anything like that. But parents, that's a different story. I've had parents broken collarbone, you know, yeah, I've had some serious fractured vertebrae in the neck. I mean, one parent hit a jump that she didn't know was there and landed on her head. So we had to walk her bike out, and all this. I mean, so the parents were the ones I was more worried about than the kids. So yeah,
Yeah, it just seems to make so much sense, really, when you think about it. Oh, again, I wanted to have you on. I wanted to talk about to someone who had a lifestyle perspective, but I don't want to move on to that without talking about another sport.
Okay.
Now, you are familiar with pickleball, and you are not a casual pickleball player, right?
Yeah. I am not a cat. That's true. I am not a casual pickleball player.
So talk about pickleball a bit. What are you involved in these days with pickleball?
Oh, geez. The better question probably is what am I not involved with in pickleball? Unfortunately, pickleball has sort of overtaken my life, and I don't ride as much mountain biking as I do now. So I'm sort of in between homeschool groups right now. But I started pickleball in 2016. I was back in Michigan visiting. I was actually picking up my daughter from our alma mater and Andrews University. I was picking her up after her freshman year in 2016, and my mom invited me out to go play pickleball at the church, the Phil Daoust church. There, they have a gym. She said, "Hey, come and play pickleball with us." And I'm like, "Play what?" But I grew up playing tennis. I'm not that tall. I'm 5'6", so I wasn't good at basketball or volleyball or, where height was a premium, and so but I excelled at racket sports, tennis. When I was in academy, I was playing in high school, I was playing college students in tennis. Racquetball, I picked up in college and I did very well at that. Ping pong, I was playing since I was a kid. I'm Filipino, so all Filipinos have a ping pong table, right? So I can make that stereotype, right? So, anything with a paddle or racket, I did very well in. So when my mom said, "Oh yeah, this is, it has a paddle," I said, "Okay, I'm in." And from that moment on, I really got into it. And so when I came back to California, however, there was no pickleball right here around the Loma Linda area. Probably like within a 40, 50-mile radius of us, there was no pickleball. So long story short, I ended up getting a net, started it in the local public tennis court here, invited some friends. There was like actually 9 of us, and that was the start of pickleball here in the Loma Linda area. And then it kept growing, growing, growing. I kept hopping around looking for other places to play. In the meantime, I became the ambassador here because there was no. So USA Pickleball is the national governing body of pickleball, like USA Swimming, USA Gymnastics. USA Pickleball is the national governing body of pickleball. And so they make the rules, they approve the paddles, what's legal, what's not legal. And their mission is to grow pickleball in the US. And then eventually when it gets to the Olympics, then we would be involved with selecting the Olympic team. But right now it's not even close to being in the Olympics yet. So I became an ambassador for USA Pickleball. It's a volunteer position, but I became the ambassador. So I was sort of the spokesperson in this entire region. As we kept growing, that's when people said, "Hey, we should start this in Riverside. We should start this in Redlands. We should start this in Yucaipa." So being the only ambassador at the time, I would go and meet with Parks and Rec, City Council meetings, whoever to try. We drive around looking at tennis courts, trying to find an empty tennis court that we could potentially start a pickleball group there. So that's how these places started. And then once we found the place, we got the okay with the city. Then I would tell those people, those residents from that particular city, because they were all playing in Loma Linda at the time. I said, "Okay, now we have a place, set your schedule, and then now you'll have to select an ambassador because I can't run Loma Linda." And I was doing Grand Terrace as well because that's where my church is, and we had pickleball courts in the back of our church. So I said, I can't run more than 2 cities. So that's how the ambassadors started growing in this area. And now you fast forward to today, in every city around Loma Linda, there are pickleball ambassadors, pickleball clubs. I mean, huge clubs, cities building new courts. Yucaipa is just finishing up 12 new courts. We got $500,000 over COVID from the city council to expand their pickleball program. Riverside is in several parks and they're building another pickleball facility there. So, I mean, it's crazy to see how it's exploded in this whole region just from the 9 people that started. And and I look at it not just as a fun sport to play, but I look at it as a public health intervention because if you think about it now, there was 9 of us playing pickleball. Now you look at, I mean, every day of the week there's pickleball happening somewhere, and now there's generations of people. Like if I show up at Redlands, I could play there. They wouldn't know me from Adam. I mean, even in my own courts at Loma Linda, I just met somebody on Sunday. They didn't know well, a lot of people know who I am, but they don't know who I am. So when I introduce myself, they'll say, "Oh, you're Ernie." Like it's like, "Oh, is that a good thing or bad thing?" But I'll still run into people that don't even know who I am, and they'll ask me, "Oh, how long have you been playing pickleball?" And then once I share them a little snippet of what the story is, because we were the ones that got the pickleball started at Loma Linda, they're like, "Oh my word, you're the the founder. But if you look at the Blue Zone show, the Netflix show on the Blue Zone show on Netflix, Dan Buettner calls my mom the godmother of Loma Linda pickleball. And people who know her and know us, they'll say, wait, how is she the godmother of pickleball? But she lives in Michigan, Loma Linda. She doesn't live here. But if they know the story, it was because of her. She got me in the pickleball, and then I got it here. So the people who know the true the real history, they credit her for introducing it to me, and then me bringing it back, and then starting it here. So I've been involved as an ambassador since 2016, and then in 2020, I was elected on the board of directors for USA Pickleball. It's a nonprofit, so they have a board of directors. So I've been serving on the board of directors now since 2020. So that has been a really unique opportunity to see the growth of pickleball, both in the U.S. and internationally, from the 30,000-foot level, because we're the board of directors over USA Pickleball. And so a lot of drama in the pro side. I'm glad I'm not really involved in a lot of that. But on the recreational side, the grassroots side, it's exploding. Since COVID, it's been just going vertical. I mean, I'm a certified pickleball coach as well. So I got certified a few years ago. So I'm teaching here at Loma Linda part-time that's my other hat I wear as a pickleball coach. And so I'm teaching pretty much every day of the week, either private lessons or classes, because so many people want to take lessons and learn about pickleball. You can say I'm a little bit involved, and I play tournaments as well. So I
Right.
do train and I drill. Besides teaching people, I drill and practice myself as well. I play now mostly nationals is the big tournament I play, and then I play a lot of local small tournaments just to keep, get that tournament feel. But nationals is my one big tournament I like to go to and play.
Next year might be a big year for you, I think. Is that right?
Next year? Oh, yes, because in the pickleball world, everybody's excited to get older. So once you hit 50 and older at the big tournaments, they go by 5-year increments, 50 to 54, 55 to 59, 60 to 64. So then you end up playing people in your age category and your skill level. So next year I turn 60, so I get to age up into the next category, and I'm the youngest at that category. So it's like great, I get to play all these older guys, and I'm all
Right.
excited about that because you know.
I like that you called it like a community health education intervention. I don't know, intervention might not be the right word. I don't know, strategy.
Well, I called it a public health intervention because I think of it as an intervention that gets people moving. Because you know what the federal recommendation is for physical activity, right? It's 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity per week. That's the dose of exercise that's recommended to all Americans, right? And last I saw, there's still like 25-30% of Americans that are getting close to zero. So we've got a quarter of Americans that are not even getting close to that. Then you have probably 50 or 70% more that are barely getting some, but not that. Then you might get only like maybe 25% Americans who are getting that minimum or more. So, we've got a long ways to go to get people more physically active. So that's what I look at pickleball. Because if you look in this area and you look on those courts, I can guarantee you most of the people you go to any court here in the Inland Empire, which is our area here where Loma Linda is, and you ask them what they were doing before pickleball, most of them would say they weren't doing anything. They were sedentary, they were not active. Maybe they were active before when they were younger, or if you're talking to older people, they weren't active at all. So now you see them being active, and I use the acronym SIMPLE to explain pickleball or to remember the attributes of pickleball. Because when I was working at Beaver, I was trying to promote physical activity to people, right, to the patients. But mountain biking was, like you said, it was sort of scary and dangerous, and it's very intense. I mean, you just don't get on a mountain bike and start riding. It's very intense. It's very hard to do. I played ultimate frisbee when I was younger, and that's also a very intense sport. So again, I wasn't going to get my patients who were overweight, out of shape, diabetic, whatever, to all of a sudden start playing ultimate frisbee. And so I was always looking for that holy grail of exercise, physical activity that could override the excuses that people would tell me. So over those last 30 years, I would talk to a lot of patients and they would tell me why they don't exercise. They know they should exercise, but they would tell me why they don't. oh, it's boring, it's too difficult, I don't have time, it's too expensive, it's too difficult, to do. I mean, not just intensity wise, but it's too difficult to perform, So they would give me all these things. And when I started playing pickleball, I found that pickleball basically checkmarked all those excuses off. So they had no excuse. Like, so that's why I use the word simple, because simple, you know, it's social. So, because I don't like some things that are boring. Like to me, walking is boring because it's just, I can't be so, I mean, I could walk with other people, but I don't know. It's just not social enough for me, even though I know it's easy. But pickleball is social. The I in simple stands for inexpensive. All right. So it's inexpensive and also it's inclusive. So I've taught 6 years old to 60 years old and plus, or 80 years old. My mom's 86. She still plays 4 times a week. Right. So it's inclusive. I played with people in wheelchair. Okay. Wheelchair pickleball players. So I played with deaf players. I mean, we have a whole school of the deaf here in Riverside. There's a bunch of them that are really good pickleball players. So it's inclusive. It's inexpensive. A paddle. You could get we started with wood paddles. Those cost $10, right? The net is inexpensive. M stands for multi-generational. So my mom, kids, grandkids, that we all play. We all play and we can all play well. And my mom and I can actually beat a lot of the younger players because of the way the sport is designed. So multi-generational. L. So I forgot P. You can play anywhere. So that's why it exploded during the pandemic, because you could set up a net. I've played in hotel lobbies, cul-de-sacs, streets, parking lots, hotel conference rooms, wherever I can set up that net, you can play pickleball, right? The L stands for the learning curve is very easy. I can teach most people, and within an hour, they're playing their first game. All right. Very easy learning curve. Tennis, you got to take a lot of lessons in order just to even serve the ball, right? So learning curve is easy. And then the last part, E, is that it's enjoyable. If it's not enjoyable, I don't care how good the exercise is. If I had a patient who did not enjoy the activity, they would not do it, right? So pickleball pretty much check marked off all those excuses I heard over the years. And so to me, pickleball is like the holy grail of promoting physical activity because you can do it anywhere, it's cheap, well, all those reasons. So it's just a matter of getting people to try it. And not everybody, my wife doesn't play pickleball. She has zero hand-eye coordination. So, and she has a partially torn ACL. So she can't move laterally. So that's fine. She runs every day. I'm not worried about her, but it's the other people out there that I'm worried about, the other 80% of the people.
I ran across a couple articles in the Guardian online, and
Yes.
I wanted to talk to someone about it. Like I said earlier, I wanted to have you on and have a conversation with you for a while. I think your background gives like a really good perspective on part of this. The articles were not written by a health expert, but by Phil Daoust, the joint deputy editor of the Guardian. I think that makes them interesting because it is a perspective of a pretty normal person.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
first off, in March, Daoust wrote about his desire to live longer with better health.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm wondering is, from your experience, how typical it is that people get to their 50s and 60s and then all of a sudden realize, you know what, I need to do something different.
Yes. No, that's very that was probably a lot of the patients I saw working when I was working at Beaver Medical. These are people that are in their 50s, 60s. Their kids are now teenagers or high schoolers, maybe even college, depending when they start having kids. And so they're starting to get like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna start doing, I want to do stuff with my kids, be active with them, or they're getting back, they're starting some new things or doing that, and they're finding that, man, my back hurts, this hurts, I'm overweight, my knees hurt, my joint, they're out of breath, they can barely walk up flight of stairs. Then they realize, oh man, all these years from my 30s to my 50s, so that 20-year gap, people usually have let their health slide. Up to their 20s, they're in college, they're young, they don't think about that. The body, it can take a lot of abuse. Then they get into their mid 20s and early 30s, like my daughter's 27 right now. So she's just starting her career. So, they're busy and they still want to have a good time. But if health is not a priority for them and it hasn't been established early on, that's usually, so, well, I don't have time. I'm busy with work. I'm establishing my career. So then for the next 20 years, from their 20s let's say 25 to 45, they've sort of let that part of their life slide. Okay. And they're not exercising, they're not eating right, maybe their sleep habits aren't that great, whatever. Then they start getting in their 50s and all of a sudden their blood pressure's up, they're borderline type 2 diabetic. We call that syndrome X or metabolic syndrome. Now they're getting all these warning signs, right? At 50, you have to get all these tests that you have never gotten. I got my colonoscopy, right? So you start getting all these checkups and you realize, oh no, I've just wasted the last 20 years and not doing anything. And now I'm at this crossroads. And so I think that's why we see a lot of people in their 50s and even 60s. They're saying, look, they say the 60s is the new 50s now because everybody's living longer and all this. So I think that's why we're seeing those people are like, oh, I don't want to live the next 30 years using a walker or a wheelchair because I was a diabetic and then I had to get amputated, that kind of thing. Or I went blind because I didn't take care of things when I could have. So I saw a lot of patients in that age range because it was sort of a wake-up call for them.
Now, people like you have been talking about this for, a long time, since,
Hmm.
the mid 80s, late
Yeah.
80s, which, how do we get people to recognize that they need to take action before they're already in a disease state? But
Hmm.
it seems like the medical system is still training people, the culture is still training people that unless you're seeing some problem, unless you're seeing some disease, unless you have some diagnosis, it's not time to act yet.
Mm.
And so, do you think that we're learning things? Do you think we're getting better as a culture at saying, I don't want to wait until I have a problem before I do something? Or do you think it's just a problem that's just going to always be there?
I sort of see it as a two-edged sword. I think people are more aware in general because there's so much information out there now, right? On the internet, on Netflix. I mean, you look at all those health documentaries from Forks Over Knives and, all these kind of shows. I mean, they see the shows, they realize that, hey, I can do something about it. And when we look at our healthcare, our healthcare cost for our country is over $3 trillion. And the majority of that is connected to NCDs, non-communicable diseases. If you look at those NCDs, the majority of those are lifestyle related, right? The number one still is heart disease with cancer a close second. Hypertension is in there. Type 2 diabetes is in there. So when you look at the top 4 or 5, they're all lifestyle related. And when you look at the root causes of those diseases, they're usually connected to smoking, physical inactivity, and poor nutrition, and then also excessive alcohol. So those are the four main root causes of the majority of those things. So I think people have become more aware. What has been the challenge, though, however, is with that increase of awareness, medicine has also progressed. So I think sometimes people are like, yeah, well, I know I need to change this and that, and I've got, clogging of the arteries, but I just saw this other show about the latest thing where they can the medical technology can take care of it, so I don't have to change my behavior. So most people don't want to change their behavior. They're still looking for the magic bullet from healthcare. So I think that's why we're still having this tug of war because medicine, our current healthcare system, would rather pay $10,000 or $30,000 for this magical stent to keep the vessels open for a few more years till it restenosis and clogs up again, versus $1,000 for a personal trainer to work with that person every week and then keep them healthy and active and and eating the right foods and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's tough when you're working in my field. Just telling people what to do isn't enough, and that's why we teach about health coaching, motivational interviewing, because when you're trying to get people to change behaviors, just giving them information and just telling them what to do is hasn't been working. And that's a challenge that we face, and that's what we teach our students now. How do you become a health coach? Use motivational interviewing to really be client centered so that they're making the choices. And so our whole goal is to make the person become intrinsically motivated to make the changes and not me telling them because I have my doctorate and I've studied this and I know what's best for them. We know that doesn't work. And it may work for a little bit or for a few people or temporarily, but it doesn't work long term.
One thing that Douse talked about was that he thinks he's in better shape at 60 than he was at, quote, 50, 40, or even 30.
Hmm.
So what do you think about that? If someone has neglected their fitness for, 20 years, how likely it is that they can be stronger at 60 than they were, say at 40?
That's, yeah. I mean, it's a matter of perspective, without knowing what he was like back then. I think it's possible because I mean, I've had some friends in my 20s and 30s who were really out of shape and then they lost a lot of weight. They got healthier. So I can definitely see somebody in their 50s and 60s being better than they were in their 30s. But if I look at myself, I was, I can say in awesome shape, but I was in pretty good shape. I mean, I was active, ate pretty well. I practiced the lifestyle. I wasn't vegetarian back then. We still ate red meat at the time, at least before my dad had a stroke. So, I mean, I wasn't super, super, healthy, but we were pretty healthy compared to the norm. So even if I did everything perfectly today, I know I will never feel like I did when I was 30 years old or 25 years old on the tennis court playing for 5 sets. I mean, my body will tell me. So I know for me, I know I wouldn't get that. But I think for somebody who was really out of shape back then, getting in shape now, I could see how they would feel that way. So, genetics is genetics. And so some people have that potential to really make a big change, and others they're not going to see that great a change. So there's a lot of factors in it, but it's possible.
I think there's also an element of definitely from a mental perspective.
Hmm.
I could definitely see if you lived a very, very counterproductive lifestyle,
Right.
if you were sedentary, if you were eating poorly, if you were, Douse talks about using alcohol.
Yeah.
I think if you have kind of that mix of things, and then, at 60 years old, you start eating healthy, you start exercising. From a mental perspective, I definitely think that you could feel better, just
Oh,
light years
definitely.
better.
Yeah, if he was drinking alcohol, eating the wrong foods, physically inactive, he probably didn't feel that great in his 30s and 40s. And now when he's clean, right? Clean circulation, clean living. I mean, yeah, you're going to feel a huge difference in your 60. I mean, just from your brain through your whole body. Yeah, it's going to be a huge difference. So, yeah, I totally agree.
And he also talks about sleep, and that sleep is one of those things he focuses on that he sees as important for longevity. How do you feel about that?
Oh, definitely. With our testing methods that we have now, I remember seeing this one study where they found that during sleep, there are these pathways in the brain, these channels, if you will, that actually open up while we're sleeping. And that is the time then when a special fluid in these channels will flush out all the metabolic waste products from the cells and flush it out. And that only happens at night while we sleep. So, when you think about a cell is metabolically active. You think of it, it's like an engine, right? It takes in fuel and then it produces waste product. And so our brain cells are one of the most metabolically active cells in our whole body, right? I mean, the brain is an amazing organ. So it's very metabolically active. So it's producing waste all the time. That's natural. Okay. But if you don't empty the trash on a regular daily basis with your sleep, that means that trash is staying in your brain. That's toxic to your brain cells. If you're not getting enough sleep, you're not flushing out all those toxins in your brain. So yeah, so sleep is critically important for flushing out and cleaning out the brain.
In March is when the first article that Douse wrote, it was on the Guardian Online. I'll put a link in the show notes if anybody wants to see what he's writing, because he's continuing to write about his journey to get healthier, which is interesting. And in April, he wrote a piece with the title "The Muscle Miracle." And I build enough in my 60s to make it to 100, even though I've never weight trained, end quote. I think that's a really interesting title. And I'm wondering if you could just first talk about like how that title hits you without talking about anything in the title. How does the muscle miracle and the concept of building enough in my 60s to make it to 100? What do you think about when you hear that title?
Oh yeah, I've actually been preaching that for a long, long time now, just because, and not that I'm a bodybuilder or anything like that. I did work out, I think I started working out more regularly when I was in college because I had access to a gym and all. Yeah, I totally 100% agree with that because as I've been getting older, I've been feeling the effects or the benefits, I should say, of muscle training, strength training. We call it anaerobic training, is the other term that we'll typically use. But that I've been feeling the effects of that because, Loma Linda is known for being vegetarian, right? That's the big thing. In almost every exercise lecture that I give, guest lecture that I give, and I've been doing this now for like 30 some years, or exercise talk that I give, I always start off with this question, with people knowing that I come from Loma Linda and they know all about plant-based vegetarianism, blah, blah, blah. So I'll say this, I'll say, which is more important, your diet or exercise? Now, I don't specify what kind of exercise, I just say exercise in general, right? Exercise or your diet, nutrition, right? And I'm not talking about, well, if you don't eat, you're going to die. Yeah, duh, that's sort of duh. Obviously, you got to eat. So I say, which one's more important? And so, oftentimes people will choose diet because, that's what we've always been hearing about. That's what we usually hear about. So then I show two pictures after I've surveyed the audience and I see how many how many people chose diet over exercise. I'll show two pictures, astronauts and somebody in a coma. Okay. And I'll say this, what kind of nutrition do you think NASA is giving the astronauts? They're giving them the best food money can buy, best nutrition, right? Supplementation, phytochemicals. I mean, whatever they can get, NASA can get them. They're giving them the best nutrition NASA can afford them. And yet, if they were to stay at the International Space Station or go on a mission to Mars, for that would take years, okay? Even with the best nutrition, what's going to happen to their body? And most everybody knows the answer, right? What's going to happen to their body? They're going to
Atrophy.
atrophy, right? Their muscles and their bones are going to literally fall apart, even with the best nutrition. Then I bring it closer to home. I say, go to the hospital, look up a coma patient. Medicine is pumping into them through tubes, whatever, even if they're in a coma, they're pumping in the best nutrition medicine can give them. And yet, what happens to their bodies over time? It still atrophies, right? Falls apart, the muscles break down, the bones break down. Even if they're doing physical therapy in their beds, they're laying in bed 24/7. So it's sort of a trick question. But I say, even if you have the best nutrition and you don't exercise, you're going to fall apart. That's the bottom line. So we were basically created to move, be physically active. The best is to have good nutrition and exercise. That's, obviously the best. And yes, you can have pretty good bodies and have bad nutrition for a while, but then that eventually catches up, especially more on the inside. If you think that just being a vegetarian or plant-based diet person is all you need to do, you're in for a rude awakening when you do get to your 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. If you're just doing good nutrition only, you're going to have problems with breaking bones, falling, imbalance, weakness. You can't get the bags out of the car, lift the grocery. Your daily acts of living are going to be severely impacted, because even though you're a vegan, perfect plant-based diet, if you're not physically active. So yeah, so to me, the fountain of youth really is not a liquid that we can drink, but it's really physical activity. And specifically as you get older, I even divide it then between aerobic and anaerobic. You could have a great heart and you could be walking every day, but if you're not doing strength training, you're still going to fall apart eventually. As my mom has been getting older, I've been pushing her to go to the gym because she plays pickleball 4 or 5 days a week. She's out there running, got a great ticker, cardiovascular system, respiratory system is great, but her muscles can still be wasting away. So she's in the gym 2 to 3 days a week, pushing the weights and staying strong. So that to me is really the fountain of youth, because if you can't get up and if you can't get yourself out of the chair on your own power, you're going to be pretty stuck and sedentary.
It's interesting. After years of not cycling, a couple summers ago, I decided to buy a new bike and get back into it. I've been on the bike now, doing longer rides and training for things like the Seattle to Portland ride. What I'm starting to learn now, after 2 years in, is that that has been incredibly beneficial, no doubt about it. My metabolic disorders are improving, which is awesome. Recently, I've started learning more about that the activity that I'm doing when I go out and I do very low intensity for 50 miles even.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not stressing my body in certain ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so those slow twitch fibers versus fast twitch fibers. So there is an element of resistance training that is different than getting out there and just spinning lightly for
Right.
several miles. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, coming from, you're road riding, I'm mountain biking. Typically, the leg muscles are going to get a lot of strength training because you're climbing and you're going up hills as what and all that kind of thing. But yeah, in the end, but we have gears. And so in the end, though, because you're doing something that's sort of a more rhythmic, you can only push so hard to get that kind of strength training from a cardiovascular activity like cycling or running or something. Yeah, you're going to tone up somewhat in those muscles, but it's not quite the same, like you said, of stressing it even more so to the point where you can actually stimulate growth. And so that's why cyclists, especially if you're a racer, for example, and then you have an off season, you'll notice a lot of articles in the bicycle magazines in the off season will focus on strength training to sort of build up that strength capacity, especially in your core. Because if you're bent over that bike, that's a lot of stress on your low back, your shoulders, your neck muscles, your arms. You're holding that position for a long time. And that's, almost like an isometric kind of thing where you're not moving a lot, but you're holding that position. If you don't strengthen it beyond what you would get on the bike, then over time it'll just get harder and harder and harder. So the body responds to you have to push it harder in order to then do your daily stuff that you want to do. And you can only push it harder if you are doing it in a safe manner, which would be like strength training off the bike. So that's why if you're doing some kind of cardiovascular, whether it's running, cycling, swimming, or something, like swimming, for example, when Summer was getting up higher levels, they had a component of dry land exercising. Okay. They did weights, they did rubber bands, they did core strengthening because they knew that doing that kind of thing, number one, would protect them from injuries, overuse injuries in the pool. And number two, it would make them stronger in the pool. They just didn't swim more and more and more and more and more and just doing more of the same because then that would just lead to overuse injury. And the cardiovascularness of swimming would only offer so much resistance, right? I mean, it would only go up to a certain point. But with dryland exercising, you could use stronger and stronger bands or heavier weights or medicine balls, and you could push your body in short sets and reps and then push it harder, break down the muscle, build up more muscle. So that way then in a pool or on the bike or on the track or on the street, now you can do that activity more safely, stronger, faster. I mean, that's why I was strength training. I was at the gym this morning. So I was working out with the weights, with the machines, not so much because I want to try to get to a physique like, I want to be, a bodybuilder looking physique. No, I'm doing it because I want to reduce injury on the pickleball courts, and I also want to increase performance on the pickleball courts. And just playing hours of pickleball will not do the same thing for my muscles and bones and tendons and ligaments like it would when it's getting more stressed in a controlled and safe way in the gym. So that's why I do my gym workout for the pickleball court.
It can be intimidating sometimes. I
Hmm.
shouldn't say sometimes. I should say it can be intimidating
Yeah.
going into a gym and there's, whatever, 40 different machines and figuring out what to do. Do you have some advice for someone that's not done any weight training and later on in life they decide to walk into a
Oh yeah.
gym and take it on? What would you say?
My number one advice that I always tell the patients is this, is that, because I can talk about it in class, I could talk about it in our private appointments, the exercises, what to do, but I know that just telling them in the office setting probably wasn't going to be that beneficial because they either would forget, they wouldn't understand, they wouldn't know how to do it. I mean, we didn't have a gym at our clinic, right? So I couldn't even show them. So my number one advice I would always tell everybody, and I still do to this day, is get a trainer. Get a trainer, pay for, a few sessions, have them show you the machines, the exercises to do, how to do it properly, how to set up the machine properly, all those kinds of things. Because then once they learn how to do that, then they could do it on their own. They don't need a trainer, they're not an athlete, so they don't need a trainer all the time pushing them, but at least get a trainer to show them how to do that. I mean, I remember when my dad he had a stroke. He passed away about 5 years ago. So about 30 years ago, he had a stroke. And I remember one time he came here to Loma Linda from Michigan. He was using a quad cane, okay, to walk because his right leg, was affected by the stroke, so he couldn't walk very well. So he came out here for a month. So I was his personal trainer for 1 month. I met him at the gym at our university here, Drayson Center, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. I was still working at Beaver at the time, so I would come on my lunch hour, meet him at the gym. We were doing all different exercises. His right arm and his right leg were the ones affected, right? So we would do all these different exercises. And I remember real clearly, his right leg was so weak that on the leg press, he's sitting in a chair, and then the leg press plate was in front of him, like in front, and then he'd push his legs away from his body. His right leg was so weak, and I was doing single leg, so I wasn't having even both legs up there. I had his right leg on there. His right leg was so weak, he couldn't even hold his own foot up there. It would just flop off. So I literally had to hold his foot on the plate, and then I had to put with zero weight, push the plate for him, help him as he pushed his leg on that 0 pounds of weight. 1 month, 3 times a week. By the time we were done, and I would push him, we did 2 sets, 3 sets of 10 to 15 reps. And when he could do a certain weight easily, I bumped it up, the weights. By the time he was done, the month there visiting here, he was leg pressing with his bad leg 45 pounds.
Wow.
Single leg, 45 pounds. Now, how do you think that impacted his walking? He was able to walk without his cane. I mean, that's how strong his leg got from, post-stroke. Okay. He goes back to Michigan, doesn't have the gym there because they hadn't built their university gym at the time. He had no personal trainer, nobody to push him hard, keep increasing the weight, stressing out his leg. Within a month, he was back to using his quad cane. That's how
Wow.
fast he lost the muscle in his leg just because he didn't have, and I was pushing him. I mean, if I saw that he was doing it pretty easily, I made a note of it. The next time we went into workout, I'd bump it up. In fact, one time this was for one of the arm exercises. I didn't tell him I changed the weight. And so he was pushing and struggling and I said, come on, Dad, you're just being a wimp here, and I would smack him with a towel and he'd get upset at me. I said, come on, you can do one more rep, one more rep. I kept pushing him, pushing that hard. I was pushing him that hard, right? Finally, he would do the sets and the reps. And then I say, oops, I had it on the wrong setting. And then he'd get all upset at me. But I said, look, Dad, though, you did 10 reps, 2 sets of 10 reps at that new setting, right? It's all in the head. So that's how I kept pushing him, pushing him. And so that's what the muscles need, is that kind of being pushed to you don't think you can do it anymore. And again, we weren't trying to make him a bodybuilder. It was all for quality of life. But that was always so dramatic to see just in 1 month how much muscle. And at the time he was, I think, like 70 or 69, how much muscle he gained back in his stroke leg, his right leg, in just 1 month of 3 days a week, and enough to that he could walk without the cane. I mean, and then how fast he lost it when he went back home. That's an extreme example with somebody with a stroke, but that happens to every other person that's sort of quotes normal. And they say we lose 1 to 3% of our lean mass, I've heard different things, every 10 years, every 5 year, whatever. But just know this, depending on your genetics, of course, and your lifestyle, if you are not doing strength training, actual strength training with weights and pushing your body to that point where, you can't do another rep or whatever, or even if you can, I mean, but, pushing it to the point where you're having to strain, if you are not doing strength training of any kind, whether it's calisthenics or, yoga, power yoga, or, whatever, lifting weights or doing a machine, if you're not doing that, you are losing muscle and bone. There's no question. You are losing it. Even if you're cycling, even if I'm playing pickleball, even if I'm walking or running, if I'm not doing strength training, we are losing muscle.
The American College of Sports Medicine, that's an organization that I believe you're certified with.
Yes.
If I wanted to go out and find somebody that really understood the issues of somebody that was older, would it be, do you think anybody with American College of Sports Medicine certification would be good? Do you think it would be valuable to look for someone that has, I don't know what you would call it, a geriatric fitness perspective or whatever? What do you think about finding a trainer and looking for someone that's really going to understand the issues of someone that's older?
That's a very good question. I know there are certifications. I'd have to check with ACSM, but I know there are certification for trainers that are specific to geriatric and the senior population. So that would be one thing to see if they're certified in that kind of thing. The second thing would be is there's a lot of certified trainers that have, good academic backgrounds. They might be an athletic trainer, they could be a physical therapist even, right? So if they have that kind of training, then I would trust them to know what to do for a senior population. But there are certifications that are geared specifically for strength training with seniors. So if they have that, and if they said they have a pretty good track record, a history of working with seniors, because seniors, yeah, you need to know certain things about working with seniors than you do with working with somebody who's in their 30s or 20s. So I would look for those kind of things.
This has been a great conversation, and I knew it would be. I'm so glad that you agreed to come on. Talk a bit about what you have on the horizon as far as your own fitness goals.
My own fitness goals? Well, well, that's a good question. I have one goal for pickleball. One of my goals for pickleball, I don't know if this is fitness per se, but one of my fitness goals is to play a tournament in every state. I mean, they have that for running, right? You could do a marathon in every state. So I said, hey, why not for pickleball? And I'm not just talking about just playing pickleball in every state. I mean, I know other people who are working on that and doing that. I said, that's too easy. I want to play a tournament. So I have to pay, register, go there, play with a partner and all that. So that's one of my goals to do
Have
that.
you started that? If you
Oh
were going
yeah.
to add it up right now, how many states would you say you've been in?
Well, I have a note on my phone, but I think I have 12 about 12 states I've done.
Okay,
I actually have somebody gave me a water bottle, a big water bottle, and I've been putting stickers, and they gave me a set of 50 state stickers. So,
okay,
but that big water bottle's already covered with all the stickers that I've done so far. So I need
nice.
another water bottle. But I've done about a dozen states so far. So every year now I'm like, okay, where can I go this year that I haven't gone to yet to play a tournament?
Good. I think that's a fantastic goal. And again, I think it goes back to the thing of making it fun. I think
Yeah.
that sounds like a
Well,
really
and I
fun
meet
goal.
the thing is about pickleball, I've met so many people that I would otherwise have never met. I have met people in so many different countries. It's like I could go anywhere in the world, and if I mention I'm a pickleball player and they're a pickleball player, boom, we're instantly like, you have this special camaraderie. They'll invite you over. I've stayed at people's homes that I never knew before. And just because they're pickleball players, I'm staying in their homes. None of my other sports, ultimate, mountain biking, whatever. I've met other mountain bikers before. We don't have that same chemistry and all, but with pickleball, it's sort of like instant family. Boom. Anywhere. So that's to me is probably, from a social mental health aspect, having friends all over the world that if I'm going to Philippines and Japan in August to do some work and vacationing. My mom's going with me. And you should see, I was just texting with some people this morning about they're planning, taking us on this trip and visiting this and playing pickleball here in Japan and in the Philippines. My mom just texted me, oh, there's a choir that's singing in Andrews from the Philippines. And when we go to the Philippines in August, they're going to play pickleball with us because some of them play pickleball. So they're already waiting for us to come back. I mean, it's like we have instant friends anywhere we go. So it's fun.
I think that's one of the big things that has happened with me is that I'm surrounding myself with active people, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and I would say a culture that is counter to the norm.
Mm.
I think the normal North American culture is a sedentary culture.
Oh yeah,
Unfortunately,
yeah.
getting involved in cycling and in the Cascade Bicycle Club and doing rides and ended up sucking my son-in-law and into it, and my daughter
Uh-huh.
not too long ago bought a new bike, and so and my wife, we had a semi-recumbent bike
Oh,
built for
nice.
her. Yeah, creates this norm. It's kind of you're in another culture, and the norm for that culture is to be active. And I think that's very
Yes.
healthy. And I think that's what you're describing too with pickleball.
And the thing too is when you're surrounded with those kind of people that are you have a common bond of that activity, whether it's cycling or pickleball, whatever, then that sort of leads out to other things because we always go out to eat afterwards. I'm sure you do too, right? We go out to eat together, all this kind of things, and then you start talking and you learn, and people, oh yeah, I got to watch my cholesterols, and then they want to all get better and do better on the court and all this, and so it just sort of is a natural cascade of, hey, what else can I do to make my cycling better, or ride longer, or ride farther, or faster, play pickleball faster, do better, reduce my injuries. I mean, then I can share from my background, hey, nutrition is part of that, sleep is part of that, strength training is part of that. All these things are all part of that. And so it just, but because we know each other from a common interest, now we've developed a relationship. And when you develop that relationship, you develop trust. And then when you develop trust, then they're more open to listening versus if I was a stranger, walked right up to you and said, hey, did you know that strength training is important for you? And you might say, I'm not a Bible. What's that? What's that got to do with me? You might just blow me off, right?
Right.
I think the physical activity gives us that common bond, and it doesn't matter who you are, what your background is, how much money you make, how many letters do you have after your name. We're all on the bike, we're all on the court, we're all the same, and that's what I really like about it. And then later on, we learn, oh wow, he's a judge, or oh wow, she's a lawyer, or she's a this or that. I mean, we don't learn about that until way later, but we're already friends. So I think of all the things, all the benefits of being physically active. That's for me anyway. That's the biggest thing.
I love it.
Said and done.
Well, Ernie, thank you so much for joining me again. This is such a fun conversation. Fun to get an update from you. It's been years since
I know.
we chatted. And just thank you for the work that you do. All the stuff that you talk about, the early years in a clinical situation, learning. I know that the conversations you were having with people like Wes Youngberg and others, and you guys are really formulating some of the strategies that needed to be implemented in a clinical setting, and some of the strategies about how to work as a team with medical professionals in a clinical situation. So going all the way back to that, that's awesome work. The work that you've done to help people get active through pickleball, the coaching that you do. I just appreciate you for the work that you've done. So again, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks for the opportunity to share.
Yeah, loved it. So I will talk to you later.
All right. Take care.
So what about the question at the heart of this episode? Am I as fit now as I was in my 30s? I would say yes. Here is my justification for that answer. In my early 30s, I was pretty fit. But starting around 35, life got busy and I started getting less and less activity. I'm positive that I then put on more fat every year for like 24 years. That combination of inactivity and fat gain, especially visceral fat, created a health disaster. I am now turning that around and losing fat every month, and I am very active. At 35, I am sure that I couldn't hop on a bike and ride 100 miles a day for 2 days, like what I'll do in Seattle to Portland. So my activity now means that I am more fit by that measure. One thing for sure, I am more fit from a mental health perspective. Riding frequently means that I'm burning off stress hormones and avoiding the damage that they cause physically, as well as emotionally. In addition, the time on the bike is a form of meditation to me. I am 100% sure that I would rather have my fitness level today than what I had at 35. Of course, I wish at 35 I would have made the changes I am making now. No doubt about it. But given that I can't go back in time, I am happy with the steps that I am taking and believe I will continue to reap the benefits for a long time. What about you? Do you feel you've turned back the clock on your fitness level? I would love to hear your perspective. You can find my email and the show Instagram link in the show notes. And consider joining the Cycling Over 60 Club. There are 52 of us in the club right now, and it is a great group of people. I hope all of you are finding ways to get and stay fit, and finding a lot of ways to boost your mental well-being while riding. Stick with it, and remember, age is just a gear change.